Well, hello, all of my students. I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Jay, and welcome to another English lesson here on the channel. At your request, I am going to do a longer English lesson on today. I have a lengthy C-2 English story. I believe I'm calling it the Hubcap Queen. And as always, I'm going to read through the story, review phrases, and key vocabulary words. So hang around until the end. I do have quiz questions. I hope you're ready for some learning and laughter. I have my water bottle ready. Let's dive into today's story. On a quiet street in Maplewood lived Evelyn Carter, a woman with an unusual passion. Unusual passion. So when someone has something or someone is unusual, it says that they are very different. They are unique. They are not the average or normal behaving person. While most neighbors collected stamps or gardened in the afternoons, Evelyn collected hubcaps. Okay, so for those who may not know, this is a hubcap. A hubcap is the covering of a wheel. Okay, if it's a nice or a nicer covering, we call it a rim. Okay, look at the rims on that car. But if it's plastic or aluminum or an old style hubcap from the 1950s or 60s, we call it a hubcap. Okay, my grandfather collected stamps. I'm not a stamp collector. Okay, some people collect baseball cards. Here we see some of her neighbors gardened, or they were known for being in their garden. Here's a woman in her garden. Gardens require a lot of upkeep, and that is why my wife Tiffany, she refuses to have her own garden. Even though we like fresh fruit and vegetables, we go to the market. I would like to have a garden, but it takes too much time. My grandfather had a garden. It had cantaloupe, zucchini, squash, okra. Oh, he had a wonderful garden. My father has a garden, but it stops there because I will not have a garden. Not one or two, but hundreds. Her small brick house soon became a fortress of gleaming chrome and scratched aluminum. Gleaming chrome. Okay, that is one way we describe hubcaps. They shine. Okay, gleaming chrome, like a silver colored object. When the sun hits it, it's very bright. But then if it's a cheap hubcap, it's scratched aluminum. So a can is usually made out of aluminum, like a Coca-Cola can. So she had various types of hubcaps, and notice they were piled or stacked. Okay, they were stacked in corners, stacked against fences, and leaning on the porch like metallic shields. Metallic or metal shields. So Evelyn had a messy yard. She had a yard that we describe as being an eyesore. Okay, an eyesore. I remember when I was a teenager, my mother would teach me, she would tell me to always make sure that your property looked good from the street. If someone were to drive by and look at your property, you don't want it to be messy or an eyesore. You want to have, as we call it, curb appeal. Your grass is cut, the bushes look nice, trash is picked up. You don't have hubcaps everywhere. You don't have toys in the yard, broken down cars with oil stains in the driveway. Okay, you want to have curb appeal. Okay, and Evelyn's house did not have curb appeal. At first, people tolerated it. So, in other words, people came to expect this behavior from Evelyn. Okay, they tried to ignore it. They tolerated it. A few even offered her hubcaps found along the roadside, treating it as an eccentric hobby. So, excuse me, some of her neighbors, she became known as a collector of hubcaps. So when her neighbors came across hubcaps in the street or wherever they were, they would take them and they would offer them to her. Okay. It was an eccentric or a different or specialized hobby that she had, and she became popular amongst her neighbors. But as the months went by, the mountain of shiny disc grew taller, and complaints began to surface. So more and more people began to say, Evelyn needs to clean her house. Oh, it's getting messy over there. I bet she got roaches. When you hoard different things, it brings different critters. It brings different types of pests. I hate to say it, but my neighbor, he's a clean neighbor, but because he's a little bit older, he can't keep things entirely clean. And so he has roaches. And I have even noticed when I go over there, I've noticed a roach near my house now because I believe they get on my clothes or the eggs get on my clothes. And then I see them over here. I could be wrong. But that is what usually happens when people have a messy yard or they're not that clean. Okay, let's find out what happened. Her closest neighbor, Martin Doyle, was the loudest critic. In other words, a critic is someone who always complains, someone who always critiques your behavior. Evelyn, you need to get these hubcaps up. Okay, that's a critic. Evelyn, you're making the neighborhood look trashy. Okay, you're making it look like the ghetto, as we used to say. Martin was a retired teacher. So someone who is retired, they have worked in their career for 20 to 30 years, usually 30 years, and then they stop working. And because they have worked for so many decades, they continue to receive a stipend or a payment from their job that they worked. And so they no longer have to work if they do not choose to. So Martin was retired. So that means he was at home all the time. And I'm pretty sure every time he looked out the window, he saw those shiny hubcaps glaring into his eyes. Martin was a retired teacher who valued, notice, neat lawns and orderly streets. To him, Evelyn's yard looked chaotic, and ruined the neighborhood's image. It's unsightly. In other words, he was saying, girl, your yard looks horrible. Clean it up, please. Pick up these hubcaps, burn them, haul them off, do something, but it's an unseemly sight. It's not something we want to look at every day. It's unsightly, he declared at every community meeting. It's a hazard and a disgrace, a monument to clutter. Okay? So we say in this country, or we have a phrase that we say, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Okay? So Martin always complained he was like a squeaky wheel. And when something constantly annoys you and you voice your thoughts and opinions about it, people usually do something about it, okay? Let's find out what happens. Evelyn would simply smile and shrug. So she would just... Every piece has a story, she would say, brushing dust from a dented Ford emblem. Okay, so she had a hubcap that came off of a Ford car or truck. You see junk, Martin, but I see history. Okay, so she perceived those hubcaps in a way that was different from her neighbors. She found value. That reminds me of a saying that we have. One person's junk is another person's treasure. So Martin saw junk. She saw value. Okay? Watch what happens. Despite her calm defense, pressure mounted. Okay? So even though she was very reserved, very humble, she didn't argue. She began to feel pressure from her neighbors to clean up her property. Neighbors filed complaints and city inspectors knocked on her door. Here in the United States, most citizens don't keep their properties, or a lot of citizens, shall I say, don't keep their property clean. And so we have city inspectors that come around and they will give you a notice to clean your property or you will face fines. And if you don't cut your lawn, pick up trash, not only can you be fined, but the city can actually put a lien on your property until you bring your property up to code. Okay. I have heard that there are some countries like Japan that they actually have citizens that take pride in keeping their communities clean. Here in the United States, you can just throw your trash anywhere you want. It may or may not get picked up. I don't like that. If you're grown, you should know how to keep the things that you have clean. You should appreciate what you have. There's one yard that I service. You guys know that I cut people's grass, and there's a woman and she has 3 grown men staying there, her sons and maybe a boyfriend. So that makes 4. They don't keep the yard clean. They throw trash in the yard and then they expect me to come and pick up after them. Oh no, I cut the yard. I make it look nice and then I leave and I'm like, I am not picking up your trash. I'll pick it up sometimes, but I mean, they have beer bottles. They have broken toys. They have a basketball goal laying in the yard that's been laying there for over a year. They won't move it. They won't pick it up. I'm telling you, I don't know why some people do not keep their stuff clean. It's an unsightly scene. I'm just like Martin, I guess. Okay. Neighbors filed complaints and city inspectors knocked on her door. Evelyn realized she had reached a breaking point, so she had to change. But rather than surrender in shame, she turned her frustration into strategy. So, in other words, Evelyn had a plan. She decided to do something instead of just what a normal person would do, throw everything away. Watch what happens. Late one night, she cataloged, okay, her collection. In other words, she organized them. So maybe she got all the hubcaps by Ford in one place, all of the hubcaps that went on a Nissan or a Honda. She cataloged them, okay, into specific categories. Maybe she got all of the 1950s in one area, 1960s in another area. Each hubcap was photographed under the harsh light of her kitchen lamp. She listed them one by one on a website she had barely used before, eBay. At first, she expected to earn a few dollars, maybe enough for coffee or groceries. What she didn't expect was the explosion of interest. Bidders from across the country fought over rare caps from Chevrolets, Buicks, and vintage Cadillacs. So something that is vintage is old and considered a classic. Very, very valuable, okay? Car enthusiast. So an enthusiast is someone who is excited or enthusiastic about a particular item. Car enthusiast saw her collection not as garbage, but as treasure. Prices soared. She began to make some money. A cap she had once found half buried in mud sold for $300. Another, dented and faded, fetched nearly $1,000 because it belonged to a rare European model. Wow. So when something is dented, it's not straight, okay? So there can be a dent in the car and it has not necessarily a hole, but it's not straight. When something is faded, it loses its color. So if my shirt were faded, it would be the regular color here, and then maybe it would be lighter right here, okay? A faded particular piece of clothing, or in this case, a hubcap. I like this stuff. It's honey. Helps my throat. Within 6 months, Evelyn's once cluttered house had emptied. Wow, she sold them all in 6 months. The hubcaps were shipped in carefully packed boxes, and her bank account ballooned. Ballooned. So in other words, her bank account got bigger. Just like a balloon, when you blow air into it, it increases in size. And that's what happened to her bank account. Smart woman. News outlets caught wind of her story, dubbing her or calling her the Hubcap Queen. Interviews followed, so people wanted to talk to her and find out about her story and her journey. Cameras rolled, and soon her face appeared on morning shows and magazines. The irony was not lost on Evelyn, okay? The very neighbors who had branded her a hoarder now lined up for autographs and posed for pictures beside her. Isn't that how people do? People that usually oppose you can turn around and be some of your greatest followers or people that start to appreciate you. That's irony. Hold up. Now you guys like me? There was a time where you guys couldn't stand me. Oh my goodness. Her enemies have become her footstool. Even Martin Doyle, red-faced but oddly proud, admitted his tune had changed. That's a familiar phrase. Oh, your tune has changed now, Martin. You were telling me how much you despised me. You were complaining, and now you want my autograph? Oh, your tune has changed. Look at him, red-faced, but now he's proud of her. I was wrong. Well, at least he got that right, he said one afternoon, shaking her hand as reporters swarmed. So they were all around her. She was surrounded. They swarmed. You turned an eyesore into an empire. That's remarkable. Now, I will say Martin was right to complain about Evelyn and her messy yard. But maybe he could have handled it a different way, okay? But I get it. Who wants to wake up and look at a nasty yard? And now she's getting money and fame, and he is simply being humble and saying, look, I was wrong. There was value in what you were doing. Maybe you could have stored them in the garage or in the backyard. But great attitude Martin has here to admit that he was a little hard or harsh on her. But he turns around and he gives her praise for being a great businesswoman. So that's awesome. Evelyn chuckled. Sometimes the things people complain about are the very things that make you stand out. Boom! Look at that. That's a great word right there. Sometimes the things people complain about are the very things that make you stand out. Her words struck a chord, and soon she was invited to speak at local schools about perseverance, creativity, and turning passions into success. Children admired her determination. So when someone admires you, they look up to you. They aspire to learn from you and possibly do as you did. While adults admired her fortune. Okay, so adults respected her now because she had a lot of money. And some people will never respect you until you can show them the money. And so Evelyn Carter, once dismissed as Maplewood's neighborhood nuisance. So a nuisance is a person who causes problems. There used to be a show that I watched when I was a child called Dennis the Menace. And Dennis was a nuisance. What was his neighbor's name? Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson! Evelyn Carter, once dismissed as Maplewood's neighborhood nuisance, became a millionaire icon. So an icon is a very important person, okay? For whatever reasons, whether they have character that is good or bad, they have become popular, famous, and so that person is considered an icon. Her story reminded everyone that treasures often hide beneath layers of ridicule. Ridicule is when people make fun of you. People persecute you, talk about you, despise you, waiting for someone bold enough to polish them into triumph. All right, great job, great job. So I hope you enjoyed my story, the Hubcap Queen. Now let's look at a few quiz questions and we'll be done for today's lesson. Number one, tell me, what is a hubcap? I want you to write your answers down in the comment section. Number two, what does chaotic mean? Okay, what does chaotic mean? And number three, you should get this one correct because I just gave you the answer. What is an icon? What is an icon? So if you have made it this far in the video, you have done a great job. Thank you so much for hanging out with me on today's English Through Story lesson. Be sure to let me know where you're watching from. Are you a new subscriber? Are you a subscriber that's been with me for some time? If you have, let me know. Hey, Jay, I've been watching you for 6 months. I've been watching you for 3 weeks. Let me know. And as I always say, if today's English lesson has been a help to you, be sure to share the link with a friend. I know it will help improve their English comprehension, vocabulary, and fluency. And by the way, I hope you have a wonderful day and join me on my next English lesson. I'll see you then.